This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the first year after Yom Tov of Pesach. Hope everyone had a good Yom Tov. And over Yom Tov, I'm sure people ate a lot of basar. So once we're on the topic of basar, we might as well talk about hunting. You know, that's the natural topic that you speak about after Pesach, obviously. Hunting. And so you say, what does it have to do with Parshas Acharei? Well, what do you mean, what does it have to do with Parshas Acharei? You know, that's the first thing that comes to mind when you think of Parshas Acharei. There's a pasuk in Perak Yud Zayin pasuk Yud Gimel, Ish Mibnei Yisrael Umin Hager B'Soicham. Any man from the Jewish people or a convert, Asher Yotzur Seid Chaya Oyoif, that traps a wild animal or a bird, Asher Yeyachel, that will be eaten, and the Torah gives the mitzvah of Kisui Hadam. Kisei Adam, it's a mitzvah of Kisei Adam. V'shafach es damai, if you spill the blood, v'chiso v'afar, you should cover it with dirt. So it talks about trapping. So obviously the first thing that comes to mind when you learn Parshas Acharei is hunting and maybe other interesting sports. And that's what we want to talk about today, hunting. Is a Jew allowed to go hunting? I know that's on everybody's mind, after the Yom Tov of Pesach especially. They're allowed to go hunting. So for today's shiur, I hope everybody prepared their gear and their paraphernalia and their rifles and their guns and all of their other equipment, their camouflage, because we're going to be going on a trip. And I just want to introduce what we're going to learn tonight is that I am in no way discouraging anyone from planning a hunting trip. Just want to say that on the onset. I am not here to discourage any plans that you may have. Hunting, fishing. Okay, and I'll explain what I mean. So we begin with the famous tshuva, the Noda B'Yehuda. Noda B'Yehuda, Rabbi Cheskel Landau, one of the preeminent poskim of the Achronim in Madura Tinyana, Yerodei Siman Yud. And he got a letter from someone, Talmud Chacham, who is called Gumfricht Oppenheim Yatz, who, that was his name. I don't know why his parents named him that, but that was his name. And the Noda B'Yehuda introduces his tshuva with the introduction, where basically he says, I don't know who you are, but I'll answer you regardless. And the shaila is, this person was zoicha to have a big Yerusha. He had a big estate that fell to him, and he wanted to know, he had Ya'arim, and he had Kfarim, he had villages, he had forests, and he wanted to know if he's permitted to go out, lirois b'kanes reifa, to shoot with a kanes reifa, a fire tube. A musket, a cannon, a gun, a kanes reifa, a fire tube, and trap animals. Is it a problem of tsar balei chayim, where you're causing distress to a living creature? Is it a problem of bal tashchis? So Noda B'Yehuda goes through different rishonim, where he says, in certain places in Tosfos, the implication is that if you have some type of need to cause pain to an animal, it's considered permitted. Other places, the implication is there has to be a very, very legitimate need. There is definitely no bal tashchis here. And the Noda B'Yehuda says that we could make the following case. Bal tashchis for killing an animal? Just the opposite. It's bal tashchis if you don't kill animals. Maybe you could make the case that God made animals to make use of them. You have a lion, you have a tiger, you have a bear. What are you going to do? What's the lion doing for mankind? What's the tiger doing? What's the rabbit doing? What's the mink doing? God gave the animal so that you could make a nice fur coat, you can have a nice shramel, a nice borsalino. That's the purpose of the animal. So if you don't kill the animal, it's bal tashchis. The animal's going to waste. Just running around in the jungle, in the forest, maybe it's bal tashchis, not to kill the animal. So to say you can't go hunting because it's bal tashchis, you're wasting the animal, just the opposite. You're wasting the animal if you don't kill the animal. What about tsar balei chayim? So Noda B'Yehuda introduces a very important principle. And that is, he brings the Trumas Hadeshen, and if you want to follow inside, it's the top left-hand column. He brings the Trumas Hadeshen, which was written, of course, by Rabbi Yisrael Isserlin, one of the great Rishonim, who happened to write his own Shilas. Most Shilas Tshuvas Farim. Somebody actually asked the author of the Shaila, and the author responds. Rabbi Yisrael Isserlin, he composed his own questions, and he answered them. By the way, it always helps if you compose your own question. Obviously, you only compose questions that you know the answer to. right? Like, let's say there's a Rav that gives a Shiur, the best Shiloh of the week. Obviously, he's only going to give a Shiur on the Shiloh he knows the answer to. All the other Shilohs, But anyway, Rabbi Yisrael Isserlin sets forth the following rule. And that is that if you kill the animal, there's no Tsar Bali Chayim. There's only Tsar Bali Chayim if you inflict pain on the animal and the animal remains alive. If you kill the animal, if you take away the animal's life, there's no Tsar. It's bliss. It's very pleasurable once the animal goes to the animal place, wherever animals go, Acharei v'yesrem. And therefore, says the Noid Yehuda, there's no Baal Tashchis to go hunting, and there's no Tsar Bali Chayim. However, says the Noid Yehuda, the Omnam Ma'oid Ani Tama Al Guf Hadavar. The whole concept of going hunting is very foreign to me. Why? Just think about it. Which characters in Tanakh do we find that were hunters? Nimrod, Esav, not exactly the most idol mention, not exactly the biggest tzaddikim. So it doesn't seem from Tanakh that hunting is a job for a nice Jewish boy. Not that we could point to any specific Isser, but at the onset, it's not like Avram Avinu, Yitzchak Avinu, Yaakov Avinu, Moshe Rabbeinu, Yeshaya, Yirmiyah, Yechezkel, Yeshua ben Nun. They weren't hunters. The only hunters we find are Esav, the two biggest Risham in Tanakh. Says the Noid Yehuda. There's a Minhag Yisrael. The Ramah brings it down to Archaim at the end of Siman Reish Chaf Gimel. That if someone gets a new suit, you say Tischadesh, right? Wear it well, right? Tischadesh v'tibala. Wear it out. Use it well. Use it up. Wear it till it's threadbare. But the minhag is that if somebody is wearing something from an animal, whether it's leather or whether it's fur, no compliments. You don't say wear it out. Why? Says Ramah, v'racham aval kol masav. Fine, you're wearing a leather jacket, enjoy. You're wearing a mink coat, enjoy. But to elicit a compliment that, wear it till it's threadbare, I didn't realize the show was that popular. But to give a compliment until it's threadbare, that means you're basically saying, wear out the coat until we have to shoot another animal. It's not nice to say that. And therefore the Ramah says there is such a minhag not to give that compliment, even though the Ramah personally says it's a very weak reason not to give the compliment, because it could be you'll find another rabbit that happened to drop dead, or another skunk that happened to die on its own. It doesn't necessarily mean you're saying, I wish that we shoot another animal, but nevertheless, the minhag is that we don't wish somebody tibala v'tichadesh when it comes to something made of an animal. So if we don't even give a compliment that, wear it till it's threadbare by something that's made from an animal, because v'racham av kol ma'asav, certainly to go out and actively hunt down animals, says the Noid Yehuda, it's achzarius, it's cruelty. It's cruelty to an animal. The Gemara in Sanhedrin says that if you have a wolf, if you have a lion, if you have a leopard, then kol hakoidem lahargan zacha, whoever kills it first is doing a big mitzvah. Says Noid Yehuda, of course. That's when there's a lion walking down Central Avenue, obviously, then kol hakoidem lahargan zacha. But nobody ever said you should travel to the African forests, to the African deserts, to go actively shoot down lions. I mean, they're not harming anybody. They're very they're in their natural habitat. Nobody would say that it's a mitzvah to go out and shoot them over there, and therefore the Noid Yehuda says to hunt an animal is cruelty. Now he says, if this is your parnasa, if you do this for a livelihood, if you do this for a living, it's not achzarius. The same way you're allowed to shecht an animal to eat it, you're allowed to shoot an animal for its fur. God gave animals for the usage of man. In no way should people go around spilling paint on other people's mink coats.
Horse racing.
What?
Horse racing.
Horse racing? That's beyond the scope of today's... but if you have a personal shiloh, you could always see me after. But today we're going to talk about betting or general? Riding. Steroids to the horses? There's a lot of different shilas. But, so if it's your parnasa, so the Rebbeinu Shalom gave us animals to make use of for a legitimate need, and parnasa is considered a legitimate need. But says in Yehuda, because a guy has some kind of pleasure-seeking desire to go shoot animals, that's not considered a legitimate enough need to display this cruelty toward animals. So that's the first consideration. Says in Yehuda, it's Achzarius. Now, Achzarius is not a lav in the Torah. It's not one of the 613 lav, and it's just a bad midah. Says in Yehuda, so far everything I've told you is just al derech eretz, al yosher hahanhaga. I'm not saying anything which is asur or halacha. So far I'm just speaking about proper behavior. However, says in Yehuda, now let me tell you what isurim are involved. Says in Yehuda, to go hunting, you have to go out into the forest. You have to go out into the natural habitats of an animal. So here you are, you're in the forest, you're camouflaged, you're hiding behind a tree, and you spot a bear. Little do you know, there's another bear who's about to, sneak up behind you and eat you for supper. Says the Yehuda, to go into the forest to hunt is very dangerous. Bari, right? You think so? It's not a safe place to go. Go out into the forest. Says Yehuda, it's a Machon Sakana. It's a Machon Sakana. It's a very dangerous. Now, it says Yehuda, how do I know? It's not like Yehuda went around. He went out to the forest and he went hunting. But if you would have to pick one guy in Tanakh who is the quintessential hunter, you'd have Esav. And Esav himself said, "Hinei anoichi haylech lamos." I'm going to die. What did Esav mean, I'm going to die? Everyone one day is going to die. What did Esav mean? Esav was like saying, giving a musar shmooze, I'm going to die. Esav was saying, pshuta kemashmai, he's a hunter. Chances are he's not going to live a long life. It's very dangerous to go hunting. Says Yehuda, it's not permitted to put oneself in a makam sakana. If it's your parnasa, says Yehuda, then there is a certain allowance that a person can't jump off a bridge to make money. But a person's allowed to jeopardize to some extent their health and life to make a parnasa. But just for the fun, just for the thrill, to put yourself in makam sakana, that's not authorized, that's not legitimate. Says Yehuda, that's an isser. Based on this reason, it would be asur to go hunting. And then finally, he says like this. Says Yehuda, when a person puts himself in makam sakana, even if nothing happens to them, he causes Hashem to examine very closely his ledger, his spiritual ledger, his spiritual standing. And you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to put yourself in a matzav where the Rebbe Hashem is going to be looking at you under the microscope. If you're just sort of going about your business in a regular, average way, so Rebbe Hashem, he looks at you. But now you're putting yourself in danger, and the Rebbe Hashem says, now I need to protect this guy. Let me analyze, let me look very carefully to see what his standing is. A person is not allowed to put themselves in such a matzav, and therefore, for these reasons, says the Yehuda, it is asur to go hunting. So let me just reiterate. In no way am I discouraging anyone from planning a hunting trip. You should absolutely plan a hunting trip. And you should even go, maybe take a plane and go there. Whether you should actually hunt, no, that you can't. But planning the trip, avada, you should plan a trip. This way you'll be able to chazer over the tshuva of the Yehuda that you're not allowed to go hunting for these three reasons. Number one, it's achzarius, it's cruelty to an animal. Number two, it's a makam sakana. And number three, you're causing God to examine very carefully your ledger. So after planning very carefully your trip, whether you should cancel, yeah, you absolutely should cancel. But you should most definitely plan the trip. That I am fully encouraging. Okay, so now let's see some of the other interesting aspects of hunting. Because I know, again, that's on everybody's mind. There's a tshuva, a sefer that I don't believe we ever featured before. The name of the sefer is Shas Tshuva Shemesh Tzedakah. The Shemesh Tzedakah was written by Rabbeinu Shimshon Morporgo. Rabbeinu Shimshon Morporgo, who lived from 1681 to 1740. He was one of the Achronim. He was a rabbi, a Bosnian Italian rabbi. Not too many of those, I don't believe. Who was a physician, he was a liturgist, and he studied in Venice, and then he went to the University of Padua, and he graduated as a doctor. In 1704 he published the Sefer Eitz Hadas. And then at the end of the Sefer Eitz Hadas he published a satire about Mikubalim and about Kabbalah. which he was severely castigated for and reprimanded for. 1709, he obtained smicha from Rav Leon Briel. And he was one of the antagonists to the Ramchal. He did not agree with many of the activities of the Ramchal. The Ramchal was involved in different secret Kabbalistic studies, and Rav Shimshon Morporgo had different conversations with Rav Moshe Chagiz about the different activities of the Ramchal. And he writes, very hard to read exactly what he's saying. He writes, are you allowed to go out to the forest? Bekana cholol uvipsilo shel ever. So one thing you're learning today is different ways to say gun. So first we had the kana serefa, right? The fire tube. That's one way to say gun in the lashon of the Acharei. Here he talks about kana cholol uvipsilo shel ever. You have a hollow tube with a lead wick. I'm told that there's a way to shoot like small creatures. You have a little tube, and you put in a small lead. I can't exactly reveal how to do it right now, but there are different types of ammunition you could use. This is called kaneh chalo b'tzila shel ever. Basically, are you allowed to go hunting? So he has a lot of problems with it. First of all, he says it's bal tashchis. He says it's sar bali chayim. He brings the shita of Noda B'Yehuda. Noda B'Yehuda says when you kill the animal, there's no tsar bali chayim. So he says he doesn't agree with that. He says you want to say there's no isur d'oraisa if you just kill the animal. There's at least an isur d'rabbanan if you cause tsar to the animal in the course of killing it. He brings down the Gemara, the well-known Gemara. The Gemara says that one time Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi was walking, and a cow came to take refuge in the cloak of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, and Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi basically said, "Go, get out of here, lekach noi tzarta, you were created to be shechted." And Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi had Yisurim for 13 years, because he did not display Rachmanis on this animal, and therefore, based on this, we see that even though the animal ultimately was killed, the animal wasn't wounded, or wasn't afflicted, nevertheless, you see there's an inyan of Rachmanis on animals, even to kill them, and ultimately he says, there is no bigger tragedy than wasting time, which is the biggest tragedy of all. You're going to go out into a forest and sit there for hours with your target, so that after 7 hours, a little duck passes by, and then you shoot it. And now what? Now what? You'll have a duck for supper, so go to the store and buy a duck for supper. You can't even eat the duck now. It's not kosher. So says Shimshon Pargov, he is not in favor of going hunting. There's another issue to consider, and this might be slightly surprising. The Arzarua, Rabbi Yitzchak Mivina, in Masechta Shabbos, he says like this: anyone who goes hunting, when Mashiach comes and the Rebbeinu Shem serves the Levyasan, you're not invited. You have to stay home. Says Rebbeinu Shem, either you hunt now or you get the big hunt later. You choose when you want the catch. You catch now, you don't get the Levyasan later. He says, he brings down a Maimer Chazal, that the two hunters of Hashem are the Levyasan and the Behemos, or in English, the Behemoth, right? They're God's two hunters. You hunt now, you don't see the two hunters later. You stay home now, and you do what you need to do, ultimately you'll see the big show, La'asr Lavai. And Shulchan Aruch brings down the Ramah. The Ramah says, to go hunting with dogs, it's a Moshav Leitzim. So you say Moshav Leitzim. Is that any worse than like sitting around in the shul joking around? No, it's not worse. You're right, it's not worse. They're both equally problematic. But this is the problem, says the Shulchan Aruch, with hunting. So bottom line is, again, just want to reiterate, I am not discouraging any plans on hunting trips. You should definitely make plans. This way you'll chazer over the Noda B'Yehuda, you'll chazer over Shas Tzedakah Shemes Tzedakah, you'll chazer over the Arzarua, the Shulchan Aruch, and at that point you'll realize you may have to cancel your plans. What about killing bugs? Are you allowed to kill bugs? Flies, fleas, mice, raccoons. You're allowed to kill anything that bothers you. That's a legitimate need. Especially, says Rav Moshe, if there are children around. And Rav Moshe says, sometimes even gedolim, even adults, they get very scared from mice. So, he doesn't say who he's talking about, but V'hamei v'nyavin. there are certain categories of people that get very nervous when they see a mouse, and they feel very helpless. So you're allowed to kill a mouse. You're allowed to kill any creature that is causing harm to a person. But here's where there might be a little bit of a kula. Says Rav Moshe, anytime there's a legitimate tzarech ha'adam, you're allowed to kill an animal. You're allowed to shecht an animal to eat, and you're allowed to kill an animal that's bothering you. And then he says like this, V'af lekavod da'adam ha'alma. If a person's getting any honor out of it, they could also kill an animal. So let's say you're a professional hunter, and you're going to shoot the moose, and you're going to bring back the bust, you're going to bring back the head, and you're going to mount it over your living room. Some people have Rav Shach, some people have Rav Shlomo Zalman. I have a lot of different pictures. Some people, they like to mount animals. And this way, everybody comes to the Shabbos table, they could look what I caught, they could show off a little bit, they could show their trophy. Maybe that's a legitimate need. In other words, if a person, now this is not amateur hour. If you have no clue what you're doing, you don't even know which direction to hold the gun, then we're not talking. But if somebody who knows what they're doing, maybe there's something to talk about if they would actually feel this great honor from shooting down this furry creature. Okay. But under normal circumstances, it would seem from Kemat, all the Poskim, that hunting is certainly not a good thing to do. Oh, what about fishing? Thank you. That's why I knew you were all thinking about that. So you say, okay, I'm not going to go to Africa in the summer. I'm not going to Dallas or Fort Worth, where they have safaris there. Actually, many years ago, I did a seed program, and there's nothing to do there, so they took us on a safari, but we didn't go hunting. And so, can't do that, so maybe we should go fishing. Can you go fishing?
Well, we said before you're not going to have from the Leviathan.
Yeah, so I don't know if that's considered hunting. I don't know if fishing.
For eating the fish.
So now if you're going, you need supper, you're hungry, you like fish, you're one of those people, yeah, a tuna steak, it's almost as good as real steak. If you're so delusional that you think that a tuna fish could be just as good as a real steak, then you're right. Then there's no problem in going fishing to catch a fish to eat for supper. However, interestingly, what if you're just catching fish for the fun of it? You enjoy jabbing a hook through the jaw of another creature, and then after you're done, throwing it back in the water. You get a thrill from that. You get a thrill driving an hour and a half, sitting on a boat for 6 hours in the freezing cold, almost reaching hypothermia, and then finding a fish after 5 hours of sitting there, baking in the sun, and then jabbing a worm and a hook through the jaw of this poor creature. If that gives you a thrill, could you do that? Can't do it. Why? Sar B'alei Chayim. The Noid Yehuda didn't have a problem with hunting because you're killing the animal. But when it comes to fishing, you're not killing the fish. You're throwing it back in. It's keeping it alive. All you're doing is you're jabbing a knife through the jaw of the poor creature. So at least the Rav Menashe Klein, in number 8, in the Shas Mishnah Halachos, Chelak Yud Beis, Simen Taf Lamed Beis, he writes, L'fi Aniyas Daiti, Dema sheyesh kama shahochem latzadachim. There are a lot of people, they go fishing. Why? Rak levaz beis hazman. Because they have nothing to do with their life. So the first thing we tell them, get a life. V'leschoik. And after they catch them, they throw them back. Asur mishum tsar b'alei chayim. Shemetzar hadag b'chika. So you'll tell me, no, fish don't have nerve endings. Okay, I don't know. I'm not an expert in the feelings of fish. Again, and I'm not here to paskin, I'm just here to encourage fishing trips. Because if you go on a fishing trip, you have an opportunity to learn the tshuva of the Mishnah Halachos that Sar B'alei Chayim does apply to fish.
Can you make the argument that the hook, you're not actually stabbing it in? The fish is going, there's a worm on the hook.
It's a grama. It's a grama.
And they're the ones coming onto it.
Still, you're not actively inflicting the pain, but your intention is, what?
You're feeding the fish. Right.
You're feeding the fish, yeah.
It's bittersweet.
I hear. Okay.
The worm's another shayla.
What about the poor worm?
The worm's another shayla.
Now, I wasn't going to talk about this. Now that we're talking about worms, you brought up the subject. I'll just bring to your attention that if you look in Yoreh De'ah, it's not on the sheet. If you look in Yoreh De'ah on Siman Pei Daled, there's a machlokes between the Taz and the Shach. This is no extra charge, by the way. There's a machlokes between the Taz and the Shach. Do worms taste good or not? The Taz paskins that, what? Now, obviously, we're not talking about raw worms. Nothing raw tastes good. Nothing, not even sushi. But, that's just personal opinion. But, obviously, if a worm wants to taste good, you'll have to roast it. Maybe put some barbecue sauce and roast the worm. So the Taz says that worms are dvarim hamausim shenafshe shel adam katsa bahem, says the Taz. So now that you're jabbing the worm into the jaw of the fish, if you're going to cook it with the worm, you may have problems of tarfus. So the Taz would say, no, it's not noisin tam, it's noisin tam lefgan. The Shach, though, says worms taste good. So that's also an interesting thing to do. If you plan a fishing trip, obviously you shouldn't go fishing, but what I would recommend doing is gathering different worms, and if any Gentiles pass by, you could ask them to taste it and to tell you if they feel that Taz is correct, that worms are dvarim usim shanav sheshodem katsa b'hem, or whether they hold like the Shach, that worms actually taste good. So that's another activity that could be positive activity from going fishing. Now, what if you say, I'm not listening to this tshuva. I have to go fishing. My life is so stressful. Somebody told me today, their life is so stressful. The only thing, thank you, that they could do to release stress is to go fishing. They said the mist that rushes to their face when they're on a boat is the only thing that calms their nerves. So if you're a chayla like that, then you want to plan a fishing trip, could you do it on Chol Hamoed? Could you go fishing on Chol Hamoed? So there's another tshuva from the Debertzina Rav, in the Ber Moshe Chelek Zayin, where trapping and hunting and fishing is considered trapping. Trapping is one of the lamites malachos. You're allowed to do malacha on Chol Hamoed, l'tzarach hamoed. So if you plan on eating fish for supper, you could go fishing. But if you're just doing it for the sport, it's considered malacha shaloi l'tzarach hamoed, and you can't do it. You can't do it. Right. Now, if you're going in a little pond where there are no fish to eat anyway, you certainly can't do it, right? But so you say, but it is l'tzarach hamoed because I'm having fun. Fun is l'tzarach. Halachically, fun, and we're going to see, and really this is the main part of the shiur. There's a category in human dynamic. It's called Gimel Vav Daled. One word. Tes Yud Yud Mem. Gimel Vav Daled, good. Tes Yud Yud Mem, time. Good time. Is good time a legitimate halachic need? After all, everybody says, I need to give my kids a good time. I want to have good time. My purpose in life is good time. What is the concept? What is the attitude of the halacha toward good time? This is a very fundamental idea that I'm sure everyone's going to hear tonight, and I'm sure they're going to tell other people as well. Good time. What is the concept of good time in Judaism? But let's go back to killing bugs for a moment, since you brought up the topic of worms. Says Rav Moshe, okay, so halachically you're allowed to kill a pest. You have a flea, a tick, you have a fly, an ant, you're allowed to kill them, you have a bee. Says Rav Moshe a chiddush. And he says an amazing thing. That even though he never saw anybody say this, he recommends it, he feels this is the correct thing. That whenever you're killing a creature, even when you're authorized, you should not do it with your bare hands. Unless you have no choice. In other words, if there's a mosquito on your face, you have no choice, you gotta kill it. But what if there's a mouse? Chas v'shalom. So some people, they put on their camouflage, they put on their, their cap, their mask, and they get down behind the couch, they pull out their, they can't wait, or they get the broom, bam! Says Amos, you should not kill a creature with your bare hands. You should always do it al yedei grama. Set a trap, put out poison, even an insect. If you could do it somehow, you throw something at it, it's better than doing it with your bare hands. Why? Says Rav Moshe, because even when Bezdin has to kill somebody, legitimately, they're chayiv nisa. The Hashem gives them a bracha, v'nasan l'charachamim v'richamcha. That Hashem says, I'll engender mercy in you. And the Acharei HaKadosh explains that even when Bezdin is authorized to kill, there's still a danger that it could engender in them a bad meed of cruelty, so Hashem has to give them special rachamim. Says Rav Moshe, if there's no choice, you have a kid and he's going to go ballistic, or you have somebody else in the house that's going to jump up on the table and screech, so you got to do what you got to do. But all things being equal, it's always better to kill al yedei grama than to do so with your bare hands. Says Rav Moshe, I never saw anybody who says this. It's not brought down in any of the poskim, but this is my personal recommendation. Okay. Let's discuss some fishing halachos in case you do go. Again, not recommending that you go. To catch a fish and you're not going to eat, you're going to throw it back. According to Rav Nasha Klein, you can't do. But what if you're a professional fisherman and you like those tuna steaks, and the doctor told you don't eat too much red meat, so you're trying to convince yourself that tuna steak is just as good. Okay, no problem. So you claimed a certain area. This is my territory, and I'm fishing here. Ruvain is fishing here. Could Shimon sort of come very close to Ruvain and throw bait really close to where Ruvain has set up shop and start drawing the fish that would have come to Ruvain to Shimon? On the one hand, Ruvain has no ownership of these fish. This is a public area. The fish are hefker. Or do we say this is called ani hamahapich becharara? This is like a poor man who's usurping the livelihood of somebody else. How do we view this? So there's a famous Tosfos in Masechta Kedushin on Daf Nun Tes. Tosfos brings the opinion of Rabbi Tam that if something is hefker, there is no gezela, there's no stealing. So Ruvain is setting up shop. Very nice. These fish are not his until he does a kinyan on them. There's no kinyan being performed in the water. So Tosfos says like this: if Ruvain, this is his parnasa, this is his job, and Shimon's coming and infringing on his livelihood, so this is called hasagas gvul. This is what's called ani hamahapich becharara, and it would not be permitted for Shimon to set up shop nearby, and that's where the Gemara in Bava Basra applies. That what? The Gemara says, marchikin min hadag himalai ritzas hadag. That Shimon needs to go away from the first fish, the amount that fish normally swim. However, if Ruvain is just doing it for leisure, for sport, and Shimon wants to do it for sport, there's no isser whatsoever for Shimon to come along and do so in close proximity to Ruvain. So if you go to Bay Parkway, by the Verrazano over there, where all these guys are standing and they're fishing, you could go inches away from them. Now, they'll kill you, but that's a separate issue. But if you want to take a chance, there would be no halachic problem of setting up shop right near somebody else. However, then Tosfos brings the opinion of Rabbeinu Meir, the father of Rabbeinu Tam. And Rabbeinu Meir says like this, that once Ruvain already set up shop, and the fish are in his proximity, and he's doing actions to try to trap the fish, for Shimon to come along, hava ki'ilu goizalai. Listen carefully to the words. What?
It's like stealing the fisherman.
It's like stealing. It's not stealing, it's ki'ilu goizalai. It's like stealing. Comes a k'tzois achoshen. Okay, it's always good to hear a k'tzois achoshen. I think the Rosh Hashivas, Rav Shach used to advise, and many Rosh Hashivas advise, at least once a week to learn k'tzois achoshen, keeps the mind sharp. K'tzois achoshen says, in his humble opinion, he would disagree with both Rabbeinu Tam, he would disagree with Rabbeinu Meir, the father of Rabbeinu Tam, and he would say to set up shop next to Ruvain is gezela mamish, is actual stealing. Why? Says the K'tzois HaChoshen, because Ruvain was kaina the fish, the kinyan gomor. He was kaina the fish. How's that? Because halacha is, how are you kaina metaltalin? Let's say you go into the store and you want to buy a bottle of Diet Coke. So you give the proprietor, how much is a 2-liter bottle? I don't know, $1.99. And you give it to him. Do you own the bottle? No! Money is not a kinyan. You're not koine until you do Mashicha. But the problem is you can't do Mashicha, it's his store. If you do Hagbah, you lift it up. In order for Mashiach to work, you have to do it into your rishus, or into a simta. A simta is areas of rishus harabim that authorization is given for a person to make use of. What's an example of area in rishus harabim that you're allowed to make use of? Parking spot. You don't own the parking spot. The city owns the parking spot. The city allows you to park there so that they could end up charging you a lot of money when your meter runs out. That's why they let you use it, right? So that's a simta. Parking spot is a simta. Parking spot is an area in Rishus Harabim that you're allowed to use. So it says like this. If you buy an animal, how are you kind an animal? Mashicha. How do you do Mashicha? You say, Elsie, Elsie, and Elsie walks to you. So, if you call to the animal comes to you, you're drawing the animal, that's Mashicha. Even if you don't actually pull the animal, if you do an act that draws the animal to you, that's Mashicha. Says by Reuven throwing bait into the water, he's causing the fish to swim toward him. That's like calling out to an animal, and the animal comes. That is Kinyan Mashicha. But you'll say, Kinyan Mashicha doesn't work in Rishus Harabim. It only works in a simta. Only works on the sides of Rishus Harabim. So it says, and many authorities hold that the sea and the ocean has a din of a simta. And even if you say it's a Rishus Harabim, there's another Kinyan being made here. And that's where Rabbi Glatstein, that's where the big elephant comes in. Let's say somebody here wants to buy an elephant. How are you kind an elephant? I can tell it's troubling you. How are you kind an elephant? Hagbah. It's going to be very hard to do Hagbah on an elephant. So the Gemara says, Masechta Kedusha, Daf Chavav, how do you kind an elephant? What you do is, you step up on like a little step ladder, and you put some food up, and Tosfos quotes Rabbeinu Machon that the elephant sort of lifts itself up, it even jumps, even a tiny millimeter, you did Hagbah. Hagbah. You need like 50 people to lift up an elephant. But I did a Maisa that caused the elephant to be Nigba, says Tosfos and Kedusha, not Chavav. So even though I didn't actually lift up the elephant, I caused the elephant to be lifted. That's Hagbah, that's how you can be kind an elephant. And Hagbah works even in Rishus Harabim. Says the Ktsois HaChoshen, when Reuven throws the bait into the ocean and the fish swim up, so it's like the same exact way, putting food and causing the elephant to lift itself up. You're putting bait in the water, the fish are swimming upward, you're causing the fish to go upward. It's Hagbah, Reuven was kaina the fish. If Shimon comes and sets up shop and causes the fish to swim to him, he's a full-fledged gazlan. Reuven can take Shimon to court, and the court will remove the tuna from Shimon's possession and give it back to Reuven. Reuven did full-fledged Hagbah, says the Ktsois HaChoshen. Comes in the Nesivos, right? You know what Shakespeare said. Whenever there's a Ktsois, the Nesivos is not far behind. Says the Nesivos. As a joke. Get it? Says the Nesivos. He disagrees with the Ktsois. And the Nesivos says, there's a big difference between putting food to an elephant, causing the elephant to lift itself up, and then putting bait in the water and the fish will come. Why is it considered Hagbah when you put food and the elephant lifts itself up? Because at the moment the elephant is lifted, you did a Maisa. So your Maisa created the Hagbah, Ba'oisa Shah at that moment. But what if a person would take a ladder, put food up on the ladder, run behind the bush, wait for the elephant to come, and he was goyrim, the elephant was raised. Says in Nesivos, he would maintain that would not be Hagbah, because the Maisa was not done at the time of the Hagbah. So too, when you put the bait in the water, you put the bait in, and then you wait, and then ultimately the fish starts to swim. So you're not doing the Maisa, which is goyrim, the Hagbah, at the time the fish are moving upward. So, bottom line is, we have a machlokes between the Ktsois and the Nesivos, that if Reuven sets up shop in one place, could Shimon set up shop right nearby? Shimon should not be fishing altogether because it's Ar Balei Chaim. But let's say he's a professional fisherman and he's needing it for supper, then the Ktsois would say he has to distance himself, and the Nesivos would say, no, it's not considered Gzela. Reuven never did a kinyan. And this is another reason why I would highly encourage everyone to plan a fishing trip. Because if you plan a fishing trip, you'll chazer over the machlokes between the k'tzais and the nesivos. The k'tzai says that it's gezela to fish next to somebody else because Ruvain was koineh. And the nesivos says no, it is not considered a kinyan. So there are a lot of things to think about on a fishing trip. You could chazer over the tshuva of the Noda B'Yehuda, and you could chazer over the tshuva of the Debertzina Rav, and you could chazer over the tshuva of Rav Menashe Klein, and you could chazer over the machlokes, k'tzais and nesivos. Now, ultimately, chances are, if you go fishing, the trip was an abysmal failure, and you're going to come back home, and you're going to come to shul, and it's going to be very embarrassing. No, what'd you catch? Nothing. I don't have anything. So here's the big shaila. The big shaila is, could you go to, I don't know yet on Central Avenue, I don't know, Main Street, you go to the fish store, you buy a nice big tuna, and you jab a hook into the dead tuna's jaw. This way you avoid all problems. There's no sar b'alei chayim. The fish is dead already. And you come back to your wife, look what I caught. Are you allowed to lie to avoid embarrassment? That's the big shaila. Because obviously, you have no clue what you're doing. You're not going to catch anything. Are you allowed to go to the fish store, jab a hook through the fish's jaw, and bring it home and say, look what I caught? Are you allowed to lie? We know you're allowed to lie for Shalom Bayis. How is supper? Wow, it's me'ein olam haba. We're in olam haba? You're not so. For Shalom Bayis, yeah. But you're allowed to lie to avoid embarrassment. Well, that's also a big machlokes. What's the machlokes? We know that when Eliezer came to Lavan and Besuel to try to get a shidduch for Yitzchak, so the Torah tells us that when he met Rivka, he put the jewelry on, and after he put the jewelry on, he said, "Who are you?" And he was basically confident that she would be the right girl, and he gave her the jewelry even before he asked who she was. But when he told over the story, first I asked who she was, and then I gave her the jewelry. And Rashi says he didn't want to look like a fool that he's giving jewelry to a girl who he didn't know who she was. So says Achsam Sofer, from Rashi we see you're allowed to lie to avoid embarrassment. That's why Eliezer lied, and he said I asked her who she was before I gave her the jewelry. However, says Achsam Sofer, the Ramban disagrees with Rashi. And the Ramban says he never gave her the jewelry before he asked who she was. Why does the Torah write it that way? The Torah was not makbid to write it in the order that it happened. Really, the way it happened was he asked her who she was, then he gave her the jewelry. The Torah says he gave her the jewelry first, meaning he started to prepare the jewelry. In his mind, he wanted to give the jewelry, and he never lied. He told them exactly what happened. And according to the Ramban, says Achsam Sofer, we have no proof you're allowed to lie to avoid embarrassment. Who do we paskin like? Says Achsam Sofer, we paskin like the Ramban. Sorry. We paskin, you could lie for Shalom Bayis, but you can't lie to avoid embarrassment. So this really burst the bubble of the fishing trips. It's not like you could go fishing and then if you're in a jam, you could go to the fish store and buy a fish, because you're going to have to tell the truth. You're going to have to say, I didn't catch this fish. So it's really not going to help you. But again, you should definitely plan the trip. This way you'll be able to chazer, again, the machlokes, Rashi, and the Ramban. Another very quick important halacha is, anyone have fish at home? Oh, you have fish. Why do people have fish in their house? Some people say it would look nice. By the way, is a fish tank muksa? It's machlokes. Or Moshe says fish tank is muksa on Shabbos. Shlomo Zalman says lav davka. It could be it's not muksa. It's for noi. It's for aesthetic quality. But what's the real reason people have fish tanks? The real reason is because they want to be mekayim a mitzvah d'oraisa every time they eat. How's that? Because we know you're not allowed to eat before you feed your animals. So this way, every time they eat a meal, 3 times a day, in order to avoid violating Isser d'oraisa, they feed their fish. Now, I don't know if a fish needs to eat 3 times a day.
Just once a day.
Just once a day? We have experts here, right? So if taka, a fish only needs. So you don't have. Whenever the fish needs to eat and you're hungry, you got to feed the fish first. You don't have to feed the fish every time you want to eat. But if you know the animal wants to eat, you get to be Mekayim a mitzvah saseh d'oraisa of feeding. So you say, does it apply to fish? It applies to fish kemat more than any other animal. It doesn't apply to a cat or a dog. A cat or a dog, you could send it outside, they could go through your garbage. But an animal that has no other way to eat, you must feed the animal. It says Rabbi Yaakov Emden in the Tshuva number 19, before you eat yourself. Okay, let's end with this.
You can buy 3 times of fish.
What? 3 kinds of fish?
3 times.
3 tongue of fish?
3 times you put for 3 different jobs.
You have 3 different fish. One you're going to feed in the morning, one in the afternoon, one at night. Instead of Shachris Mincha Marav, or in addition? Okay. Let's end. So you say, can't go hunting, can't go fishing. I want to. So Rav Moshe has really a seminal tshuva over here, a very fundamental tshuva, which he writes to a Rebbe about how one should be mechanech children. And Rav Moshe writes a very powerful thing. He says Rav Moshe, in number 21, in Yeridea, Chelek Gimel, Siman Ayin Aleph, says Rav Moshe, we live in a country that has a lot of bracha. And when you have a lot of bracha, and you have resources, and you have more than you need, says Rav Moshe, there's a ratzain and a taiva to experience pleasures that you don't need to live. This is called, says Rav Moshe, Gimel Vav Daled Tes Yud Yud Mem. People want to have a good time. Why not? What else am I supposed to do? What else am I supposed to do on Sunday? What else am I supposed to do at night? Other than have Gimel Vav Daled Tes Yud Yud Mem. And Rav Moshe, maybe uncharacteristically, has very strong words. Says Rav Moshe, the desire for a good time, and I'm going to be very clear what I think he means. He says it's mekalkel ha'adam, it ruins a person. Ma'oid, very much. Because once you get into the habit of wanting things that you don't need to live, then you're going to want to fulfill and experience it always, even when, possibly, it's not allowed. Yeah, I have to enjoy the weather in the summer. I have to be near the water. It doesn't matter what. Yeah, but the environment doesn't allow you under these certain... It doesn't matter. I'm used to being in certain places. Yeah, but how could you go there then? You can't even open your eyes. Doesn't matter. I have a certain mode of how I operate. Says Rav Moshe, the desire for the good time ultimately brings a person. He says, Mashches es midoisav, it destroys your midos, ad shenefach l'chayara, until you turn into a wild animal. And then says Rav Moshe, first you want to do this, then I'll try that, I'll try this thrill, that thrill, a little bit more of a thrill, even maybe if it's not permitted. Ultimately, says Rav Moshe, it leads to kfira on Hashem. So what? One second. Gulp, that's extreme. Says Rav Moshe, a person in America has to train themselves to discipline. Now let me explain this very clearly. Rav Moshe is not saying you shouldn't go on vacation. He's not saying, he says at the end, he's not saying that you shouldn't have hana, you shouldn't have enjoyment, you shouldn't have pleasure. But there's a threshold. And the threshold is, do I need the pleasure? Sometimes you do. You know what? We live in a generation where with all of our gadgets and all of our conveniences and all the technology, it's by far the most stressful generation in the history of mankind. And people need legitimate relaxation and legitimate vacation. However, he's talking about the desire for the thrill. I'm not going there. I did that last year. Yeah, so what? So, did you like it last year? Did it accomplish? Yeah. I need to try something different. The desire to try different things, says Rav Moshe, is a very dangerous thing. There in Parshas Bahar, it talks about the blessing that Hashem gives to those who observe Shemitah. And first it says Hashem will give you a lot of food. And then the next bracha is, the pasuk says, "V'hisig lechem dayish as batzir u'batzir yasig v'ha'oretz titen yivula eitz hasada yiten period v'dayish yasig as batzir v'achaltem yashan ashan v'yashan b'mnei chodesh toitziu." Says Rashi, what does this refer to? V'yachaltem lachmechem lasoiva. The next bracha is you eat a little bit, and you'll be satisfied. Says Rav Moshe, Hashem just said, I'm going to give you a lot of food. What kind of bracha is it that you'll eat a little bit and you'll be satisfied? You already have a lot. Why would you need a bracha of eating a little and being satisfied with the little if Hashem already gave you a lot? Says Rav Moshe, that just because Hashem gave a person a lot, it's not to use, and it's not to experience. There's a very fine line, and a very subtle line. The more Hashem gives a person's entitled to experience more than someone who doesn't have. But there's a level, there's a threshold, that the constant desire for new sensations and new thrills, that Moshe says, is a lethal danger. It's a lethal danger. It brings a person to get used to the fact that I need this, and I can't be without it, and now I need the next level, and let's take it to the next level, and let's take it to the next level. Says Rav Moshe, the job of a Rebbe and the job of a parent is to teach Talmidim. And this Rav Moshe feels is like one of the main jobs of a Rebbe in Yeshiva. To teach Talmidim that if you don't need it, then you don't need it. There is a certain discipline that a person should train themselves. I have it. I don't need to spend it. I don't need to do it. I'm happy. I'm healthy. I need vacation. I need relaxation. Enjoy. Nobody's stopping you. But there is a certain threshold that a person needs hadracha, and a person needs musar, and a person needs direction to know where is the proper threshold according to the hashkafa of the Torah. And whether it's not fishing or not hunting, that's not the purpose of the shiur. The purpose of the shiur is the desire. I have to give my kids a good time. Last Chalamoy we do this. I got to give them Daddy, boring. What do you mean boring? So what? So what? So what? Nobody said things have to always be exciting. There's no mitzvah to be excited, to be thrilled. Says Rav Moshe, and here's the key. To teach children and to teach ourselves the thrills in life, the excitement in life, person should get from Torah and mitzvahs. What? Are you kidding me? No, I'm absolutely serious. I'm as serious as I could be. Person should teach himself. Person needs thrills. A human being needs thrills. A human being needs sensation. But it's an acquired taste. Torah is an acquired taste. Mitzvah is an acquired taste. And that's what we aim for, that's what we yearn for, to get our thrills, Mitzvah Hashem, from the right places. Wish everyone a wonderful evening.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.